The gavel hung suspended in midair as Sheriff Crenshaw stepped between the auctioneer and the crowd, his weathered hand raised like a stop sign against the desert wind. The limping horse behind him, a once magnificent chestnut stallion now, favoring his left foreleg, snorted nervously at the sudden commotion rippling through the assembled buyers. "This sale ain't happening," Crenshaw declared, his voice cutting through the murmur of confused voices. "Not today. Not ever." Auctioneer Rutherford Hales lowered his gavel with visible frustration, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool October morning. "Sheriff, with all due respect, you got no legal authority to stop this auction. The horse belongs to the Monteverde estate, and they got every right to sell." The crowd of ranchers, horse traders, and curious onlookers pressed closer, sensing drama more entertaining than any rodeo. Among them stood Paxley Monteverde himself, a thin man with hollow cheeks and expensive boots that had never seen honest work. His fingers drummed against his belt buckle as he watched the sheriff with calculating eyes. "That horse ain't fit for sale," Crenshaw insisted, gesturing toward the stallion's obvious limp. "Look at him. He's hurt. Selling a lame horse is fraud, plain and simple." Paxley stepped forward, his voice smooth as silk but sharp as barbed wire. "Sheriff, that horse has been examined by 3 veterinarians. The injury is old, healed, and causes no pain. Thunder here has years of good service left in him." Thunder. Even the name felt like a cruel joke now. The horse that had once been the pride of the Monteverde Ranch, winning ribbons from here to San Antonio, now stood with his head lowered, muscles trembling with the effort of staying upright. His coat, once lustrous as burnished copper, had dulled to the color of rust. 3 vets, you say?" Crenshaw's eyes narrowed. "Funny thing about that. I called Dr. Millicent Foxworth this morning. She's the only large animal vet in 3 counties. Says she ain't seen hide nor hair of this horse in 6 months. A murmur ran through the crowd like wildfire. Paxley's confident expression flickered for just a moment before he recovered. "We brought in specialists from Dallas, city vets who understand performance horses better than some country doctor. Then you won't mind showing me their reports," Crenshaw said, extending his hand. The silence stretched tight as a bowstring. Thunder shifted his weight, and even that small movement sent a visible shudder of pain through his frame. Several people in the crowd stepped back, as if finally seeing what the sheriff had recognized immediately. "This is harassment," Paxley declared, his voice rising. "I'm conducting legal business on my own property. You have no right—" "I got every right to prevent animal cruelty," Crenshaw interrupted. "And selling a horse this injured to some unsuspecting buyer is exactly that." Judge Cordelia Bramblewood, who had been watching from the shade of her vintage Cadillac, finally approached. Her presence commanded instant attention. She'd been dispensing justice in Copper Creek County for 23 years, and her word was law. "Sheriff Crenshaw," she said, her voice carrying the authority of her office, "do you have evidence of criminal wrongdoing?" Crenshaw hesitated. He had suspicions, plenty of them, but evidence was another matter entirely. "Judge, that horse is suffering. Look at him." Thunder chose that moment to take a single step forward, his injured leg nearly buckling under his weight. The sight was enough to make several people gasp audibly, but Paxley had money, connections, and lawyers. Within an hour, he had papers from the county clerk overruling the sheriff's objection. The auction would proceed as scheduled. As the crowd dispersed for lunch, Crenshaw stood alone with Thunder, running his hand along the horse's neck. "What happened to you, boy?" he whispered. "And why is someone so desperate to sell you?" The diner at the crossroads buzzed with speculation over coffee and pie. Sheriff Crenshaw sat in his usual corner booth, pretending to read incident reports while eavesdropping on conversations that might shed light on the Monteverde mystery. "That horse was worth $50,000 in his prime," muttered Brantley Sawyer, a horse trainer who'd worked every ranch in the county. "Now they're starting the bidding at $500. Something ain't right." At the counter, two ranch hands from the neighboring Elkhart spread whispered over their coffee. "Saw lights up at the old Monteverde place last month," one said. "Middle of the night, trucks coming and going. Thought it was strange since old Ezekiel died and the place was supposed to be empty." Crenshaw's ears perked up. Ezekiel Monteverde had been a respected rancher, known for his prize horses and honest dealings. His death 3 months ago had shocked the community. The fact that his nephew Paxley had inherited everything surprised no one. The old man had no children, and Paxley was his only living relative. What did surprise people was how quickly Paxley had begun liquidating assets. First the cattle, then the equipment, now the horses. The ranch that had been in the Monteverde family for 4 generations was being stripped bare. The bell above the diner door chimed, and veterinarian Dr. Millicent Foxworth entered, her expression troubled. She spotted Crenshaw immediately and slid into the booth across from him. "Heard about your dust-up at the auction," she said without preamble. "That horse is in bad shape, isn't he?" "Worse than bad. How long have you known Thunder?" "Since he was foaled. Delivered him myself, actually." Ezekiel was so proud. Her voice softened with memory. "That horse had the sweetest temperament, smartest animal I ever worked with. Ezekiel used to say Thunder understood English better than most people." "When's the last time you saw him?" Dr. Foxworth frowned, calculating. "Must have been April. Ezekiel brought him in for routine shots. Horse was perfect then, not so much as a scratch on him." "That's 5 months before Ezekiel died." "Yes, and I found that odd. Ezekiel never missed his horse's checkups. He was meticulous about their care." Crenshaw leaned forward. "What do you think happened to Thunder's leg?" The veterinarian was quiet for a long moment, stirring sugar into coffee she didn't drink. "The injury is consistent with severe trauma. Could be from a fall, could be from being struck by something heavy. But here's what bothers me, Sheriff. That kind of injury doesn't heal on its own. Thunder would have needed surgery, months of rehabilitation, specialized care he obviously didn't get." "Exactly. Someone let him suffer through the worst of it, then did just enough to keep him alive. It's like—" She searched for the right words. "Like they needed him to stay alive but didn't care if he stayed healthy." Before Crenshaw could respond, his radio crackled to life. Deputy Walton Riggs's voice came through clearly. "Sheriff, you need to get over to the Monteverde place. Found something you're going to want to see." The drive to the ranch took 15 minutes on winding dirt roads. Crenshaw found his deputy standing beside a pile of freshly disturbed earth behind the main barn, about 50 yards from where the auction was scheduled to resume in 2 hours. "Was checking the perimeter like you asked," Riggs explained. "Found this spot where the ground's been dug up recent. Looks like someone tried to cover their tracks, but you can still see the outline." Crenshaw knelt beside the disturbed soil. The earth was definitely fresher than the surrounding ground, and someone had tried to disguise the fact by scattering old hay and manure over the area. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" Riggs asked. "Get me a shovel," Crenshaw replied grimly. 20 minutes of careful digging revealed the truth. 3 feet down, wrapped in a tarp, lay the remains of a chestnut horse. The skull was crushed, consistent with severe trauma, but the body showed signs of excellent care and proper nutrition. "Sheriff," Riggs said quietly, "if this is Thunder, then who's the horse they're trying to sell?" Crenshaw finished. The pieces began falling into place like dominoes. Someone had killed the real Thunder, either accidentally or intentionally, and substituted another horse. But why go to such elaborate lengths? Why not simply report the horse's death and collect insurance money, unless the insurance policy wasn't the real prize? Crenshaw's radio crackled again. This time it was dispatcher Nella Quincy. "Sheriff, Judge, Bramblewood wants to see you at the courthouse immediately. Says it's urgent and concerns the horse auction." As they drove back toward town, Crenshaw's mind raced through possibilities. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to keep Thunder's death secret. The question was why, and whether Paxley, Monteverde, was part of the conspiracy or another victim entirely. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the courthouse steps as Crenshaw climbed toward whatever revelation awaited inside. Judge. Bramblewood's chambers smelled of leather-bound law books and the faint perfume she'd worn since Crenshaw was a rookie deputy. She stood behind her mahogany desk holding a manila folder that seemed to weigh more than it should. "Sheriff, I've been contacted by the FBI," she began without preamble. "Seems our little horse auction has attracted federal attention." Crenshaw settled into the chair across from her desk, his hat balanced on his knee. "FBI? What's their interest? In a lame horse?" "Money laundering." The judge opened the folder and spread several photographs across her desk. "These were taken by federal agents 3 weeks ago at a ranch outside Amarillo. Recognize anyone?" The photographs showed Paxley, Monteverde shaking hands with a man in an expensive suit. In the background, a chestnut horse that looked remarkably like Thunder grazed in a paddock. "That's Vincenzo Torino," Judge Bramblewood continued. "He's been under federal investigation for using horse sales to launder money from his casino operations in Louisiana. The FBI believes he's been buying horses at inflated prices, then selling them back to associates at losses that create tax write-offs. And Thunder fits into this how? Thunder was worth considerably more than $500. Even injured, his bloodline alone makes him valuable for breeding. But here's where it gets interesting." She pulled out another document. "Ezekiel Monteverde took out a life insurance policy on Thunder 18 months ago. $200,000. Crenshaw whistled low. "That's a lot of money for a horse." "It's a lot of money for anything in Copper Creek County. The policy has an interesting clause. It pays double if Thunder dies from accidental injury rather than illness or old age." The pieces clicked into place with ugly precision. "So someone kills Thunder, collects $400,000 in insurance, but needs to make it look like the horse is still alive to avoid suspicion." "Exactly. They find another horse, rough him up to explain any differences in behavior or appearance, then hold a public auction to establish that Thunder is alive and being sold legitimately. But why sell him at all? Why not just keep the substitute horse and claim Thunder died later?" Judge Bramblewood's expression darkened. "Because the FBI was closing in. They needed to complete the transaction quickly before federal agents could examine the horse too closely." Crenshaw stood and walked to the window overlooking Main Street. Below, people were already gathering for the resumed auction, unaware that they were participants in a federal crime. "So what's our play, Judge?" "The FBI wants us to let the auction proceed. They'll arrest Torino when he takes possession of the horse. With any luck, they'll get him to flip on his associates." "And what about justice for Thunder? For Ezekiel?" "That's where it gets complicated." The judge closed the folder with a snap. "The FBI isn't convinced Paxley is guilty of anything more than being greedy and stupid. They think he found Thunder's body, panicked about the insurance implications, and made a deal with Torino to cover it up." Crenshaw turned back to face her. "But you don't believe that." "I think Paxley Monteverde killed his uncle's horse for the insurance money, then got in over his head when he tried to cover it up. But thinking and proving are two different things." A knock at the door interrupted them. Deputy Riggs entered, holding an evidence bag containing a cell phone. "Found this buried with the horse, Sheriff. Figured you'd want to see it right away." The phone was damaged by moisture, but still functional. Crenshaw scrolled through the call log, finding dozens of calls between Paxley's number and several unknowns in the days following Ezekiel's death, but it was the text messages that told the real story. Screenshots of insurance documents, veterinary records, and most damning of all, a message from 3 weeks ago. "Old man's horse is becoming a problem. Can you handle it quietly?" The response was equally clear. "Consider it done. But this changes our arrangement." "Paxley wasn't just covering up an accident," Crenshaw said grimly. "He ordered the hit." Judge Bramblewood studied the phone's screen. "This changes everything. Sheriff, I'm authorizing you to stop that auction by any means necessary, but be careful. If Torino realizes we're on to him, he might disappear before the FBI can build their case. As Crenshaw headed for the door, the judge called after him. And Sheriff, that substitute horse, he's suffered enough. Whatever happens, to the humans involved, make sure that animal gets the care he needs. The walk back to the auction site felt like a funeral march. In 30 minutes, Crenshaw would have to make a choice between federal justice and local justice, between the greater good and doing what felt right. As he approached the crowd gathered around the auction ring, he spotted Paxley Monteverde checking his watch nervously. Nearby, a man in an expensive suit, Torino, presumably, examined the substitute horse with the practiced eye of someone who knew quality animals. The fake Thunder stood in the ring, his damaged leg trembling with exhaustion. Despite everything, he'd endured. The horse's eyes still held a spark of intelligence and dignity that reminded Crenshaw why he'd become a lawman in the first place. Some things were worth fighting for. Federal investigations be damned. The auction ring fell silent as Sheriff Crenshaw approached the microphone. Paxley Monteverde's face went pale, while the man in the expensive suit, Torino, stepped back into the crowd, his hand moving instinctively toward his jacket. "Ladies and gentlemen," Crenshaw began, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. "Before this auction continues, there's something you all need to know about this horse." "Sheriff!" Paxley interrupted, his voice cracking with desperation. "We've been through this. The judge ruled—" "The judge ruled based on incomplete information." Crenshaw cut him off. "Information that's changed considerably in the last hour." He gestured toward the substitute horse, who stood trembling in the afternoon sun. "This animal has been through hell. He's been beaten, starved, and deliberately injured to disguise his identity. And he's not the horse you think you're bidding on." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Several potential buyers moved closer to examine the horse more carefully, their expressions shifting from interest to concern. "The real Thunder is dead," Crenshaw announced. "Has been for weeks, buried behind the barn where we found him this morning." The crowd erupted in shocked conversations. Paxley lunged for the microphone, but Deputy Riggs stepped between them, his hand resting on his service weapon. "You have no proof," Paxley shouted. "This is harassment. Judge Bramblewood will hear about this." Crenshaw pulled out the evidence, bag containing the water-damaged phone. "This was buried with Thunder's body, contains text messages between you and your associates, arranging the horse's murder and the insurance fraud that followed." Torino began moving toward the parking area, but found his path blocked by two men in dark suits who'd materialized from the crowd. FBI, Crenshaw realized. They'd been here all along, waiting for the right moment. "Paxley Monteverde," Crenshaw continued. "You're under arrest for insurance fraud, animal cruelty, and conspiracy to commit murder." "Murder?" Paxley's voice rose to a squeak. "It was just a horse." "Not the horse, you fool," Crenshaw said grimly. "Your uncle." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the substitute horse seemed to sense the gravity of the moment, his ears pricking forward as if trying to understand the human drama unfolding around him. "That's right," Crenshaw continued, watching Paxley's face crumble. "We found the digitoxin in your uncle's medicine cabinet. Same stuff used to euthanize horses, but in smaller doses, it mimics a heart attack in humans. Ezekiel didn't die of natural causes. You poisoned him." The confession came in a rush, as if a dam had burst. Paxley fell to his knees in the dust, words tumbling over each other in his haste to explain. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. Uncle Ezekiel was going to change his will, leave everything to some horse rescue. I just needed him to have a heart attack before he could sign the papers. But then Thunder saw me. He was right there when I gave Uncle Ezekiel the injection. That damn horse wouldn't let me near him afterward, kept trying to bite me whenever I came around." "So you had him killed too," Crenshaw said. Torino said horses were unpredictable witnesses, that thunder might somehow give me away. I thought. He was being paranoid. But then the insurance investigator started asking questions about Uncle Ezekiel's death, and I panicked. The FBI agents moved in, surrounding both Paxley and Torino. As they read the Miranda rights, Dr. Foxworth pushed through the crowd toward the substitute horse. "This poor boy," she murmured, running gentle hands over his injuries. "He's been through trauma, but he's strong. With proper care, he might recover." "What happens to him now?" asked Brantley Sawyer, the horse trainer, Judge Bramblewood, who had arrived during Paxley's confession, stepped forward. "The horse becomes property of the county until ownership can be determined. In the meantime, I'm appointing Dr. Foxworth as his caretaker." "I'll cover his medical expenses," said a voice from the crowd. Cordelia Hartwell, owner of Copper Creek's largest ranch, emerged from the group of spectators. "My granddaughter has been wanting a project horse, something she can rehabilitate and train. If this boy recovers, we'd like to give him a home." Dr. Foxworth nodded approvingly. "He'll need months of therapy, but I think he has a good chance. He's got the heart of a survivor." As the FBI led Paxley and Torino away, the crowd began to disperse. Some lingered to discuss the shocking revelations, while others drifted toward their vehicles, shaking their heads at the day's unexpected turn. Crenshaw remained in the auction ring with the substitute horse, who had finally stopped trembling. The animal's eyes, though still wary, seemed to hold a glimmer of hope for the first time. "Don't know what your real name is, boy," Crenshaw said softly, "but you're safe now. No more running, no more hiding, no more pain." The horse stepped forward, his injured leg still causing him to limp, but his head held higher than it had been all day. For a moment, man and animal simply stood together in the fading afternoon light, survivors of a day that had revealed the worst and best of human nature. 3 months later, the horse who had once been sold as Thunder stood in a sunlit paddock, his coat gleaming with health and proper care. Dr. Foxworth had named him Phoenix, and the name seemed appropriate for an animal who had risen from the ashes of tragedy. The limp remained, but it was barely noticeable now. Months of careful rehabilitation, proper nutrition, and gentle handling had worked miracles on his physical condition. The deeper healing, the restoration of trust in humans, had taken longer but was perhaps more remarkable. Sheriff Crenshaw leaned against the fence rail, watching as 16-year-old Magnolia Hartwell worked with Phoenix in the training ring. The girl had patience beyond her years and an intuitive understanding of damaged souls, whether human or equine. "He's remembering what it feels like to be a horse again," Dr. Foxworth observed, joining Crenshaw at the fence. "When I first examined him, he was so traumatized he wouldn't even eat hay from a human hand. Now look at him." Phoenix was indeed transformed. His ears were forward, alert and curious. His movements, while still careful due to his old injury, showed confidence and even playfulness. As Magnolia led him through basic ground exercises, his responses were willing and eager. "Any word on his original ownership?" Crenshaw asked. "That's the interesting part. Based on his markings and the DNA test results, Phoenix isn't from anywhere around here. The FBI traced him to a ranch in Oklahoma that reported him stolen 8 months ago. His real name is Courage." "Courage," Crenshaw repeated, testing the name. "Fits him better than Phoenix, even." "The Oklahoma ranch has agreed to let him stay here. They said after what he's been through, he deserves a peaceful retirement with people who understand his needs." In the training ring, Magnolia had begun working with Courage on simple obstacles, walking over ground poles, navigating around cones. Each success was met with gentle praise and a treat, rebuilding the positive associations with human interaction that had been shattered by months of abuse. "Sheriff," Deputy Riggs approached, carrying a manila folder. "Got the final report from the FBI. Thought you'd want to see it." The investigation had unraveled a network of fraud spanning 3 states. Torino's operation had been using horse auctions to launder over $2 million annually, with corrupt veterinarians and auction houses participating in the scheme. Paxley's murder of his uncle had been the thread that, when pulled, caused the entire fabric to unravel. Paxley's pleading guilty to second-degree murder, Riggs reported. 25 to life. Torino got 15 years for the money laundering, but he's cooperating with investigators to reduce his sentence. And the others? 6 more arrests across 3 states. Turns out Thunder wasn't the first horse to be killed and replaced in this scheme. They found evidence of at least 4 other cases. Crenshaw closed the folder with a sense of satisfaction. Justice had been served, but more importantly, the suffering had ended. The network of corruption had been exposed and dismantled. "Sheriff," Magnolia called from the training ring. "Want to see something amazing?" She had removed Courage's lead rope and was standing in the center of the ring. The horse, now completely free, could have run to any part of the paddock. Instead, he stood quietly beside her, his head lowered so she could scratch behind his ears. "Complete trust," Dr. Foxworth murmured. "6 months ago, I wasn't sure we'd ever see this." As they watched, Magnolia began walking around the ring. Courage followed without any cues or commands, staying close to her side like a devoted companion. His injured leg still caused a slight hitch in his gait, but it was barely noticeable. "Now, he's going to make someone a wonderful companion horse," Magnolia said as she approached the fence. "We're thinking of training him for therapeutic riding. Kids with disabilities, veterans with PTSD. Horses like Courage understand trauma in ways others can't." Crenshaw nodded approvingly. It seemed fitting that an animal who had survived such horror would dedicate his remaining years to helping others heal from their own wounds. "There's something else," Dr. Foxworth added quietly. "I've been in touch with horse rescues across the region. Courage's story has inspired people. We've received donations to help other horses in similar situations, and 3 new volunteer organizations have started up. Sometimes good things emerged from tragedy. Courage's suffering hadn't been meaningless if it prevented other animals from enduring the same fate." As the afternoon sun began to set, casting long shadows across the paddock, Courage wandered over to the fence where Crenshaw stood. The horses, dark eyes once filled with fear and pain, now held contentment and peace. "You did good, boy," Crenshaw said softly, reaching out to stroke the horse's neck. "You survived, you healed, and you're going to help others do the same." Courage nickered softly and pressed his muzzle against Crenshaw's hand, a gesture of friendship and gratitude that needed no translation. 1 year after the failed auction, Sheriff Crenshaw stood in the same field where it had all begun, but everything had changed. Where once there had been an auction ring and desperate crowds, now there was a permanent facility, the Ezekiel Monteverde Memorial Therapeutic Riding Center. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The ranch that had been the site of murder and fraud had been transformed into a place of healing, funded by the insurance money that had been recovered as part of the criminal investigation. Courage, no longer called Phoenix or Thunder, stood in the center of the covered arena wearing a specialized saddle designed for therapeutic riding. On his back sat Marcus Webb, a 7-year-old boy with cerebral palsy, his face glowing with joy as he experienced the rhythmic motion that only horseback riding could provide. "Easy, Courage," Magnolia murmured, walking alongside the horse. Now 17 and certified as a therapeutic riding instructor, she had found her calling in matching damaged horses with healing humans. Dr. Foxworth approached Crenshaw, a clipboard in her hands and satisfaction in her voice. 23 children this month, plus 8 veterans from the VA hospital. Courage is working 5 days a week and loving every minute of it. How's his leg holding up? Better than we ever hoped. The regular, gentle exercise has actually strengthened the surrounding muscles. He's more sound now than he was 6 months ago. Crenshaw watched as Courage carefully adjusted his pace to accommodate his young rider's needs. The horse's intuitive understanding of human fragility had made him perfect for therapeutic work. Children who couldn't walk found freedom on his back. Veterans struggling with PTSD found peace in his gentle presence. "Sheriff," called Judge Bramblewood, approaching from the viewing area where she'd been observing the session. "I wanted you to see this." She handed him a letter on official stationery from the governor's office. Crenshaw scanned it quickly, his eyebrows rising with surprise. "The governor's award for public service?" he said. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll accept it," the judge replied. "Your investigation didn't just solve a murder, it exposed corruption that had been going on for years and probably saved dozens of animals from similar fates. It wasn't just me. Riggs, Dr. Foxworth, you will all be recognized," Judge Bramblewood interrupted. "But you were the one who saw that something was wrong with an injured horse and refused to let it go. That's the kind of instinct we need more of in law enforcement." In the arena, Marcus's session was ending. As Magnolia helped him down from Courage's back, the boy threw his arms around the horse's neck in an enthusiastic hug. Courage stood perfectly still, allowing the embrace with the patience of a saint. "Courage saved my life," Marcus announced to anyone within hearing. "Before I met him, I thought being different was bad. But he's different too, and he's the best horse in the world." Dr. Foxworth wiped away a tear. Moments like that make everything worthwhile. As the afternoon session continued, Crenshaw reflected on the journey that had brought them all to this point. A year ago, he had been trying to prevent the sale of what he thought was an abused animal. He had no idea he was uncovering a murder conspiracy that reached across state lines, but perhaps the most remarkable transformation belonged to Courage himself. From a terrified, injured animal used as a pawn in criminal schemes, he had become a beacon of hope for children and adults struggling with their own challenges. "Sheriff," Magnolia called from the arena, "we have a special presentation today." She led Courage to the center of the arena, where a small crowd had gathered. Representatives from the State Veterinary Association, the Therapeutic Riding Organization, and the local newspaper were all in attendance. "We're proud to announce that Courage has been named Colorado's Therapy Horse of the Year," announced Dr. Patricia Olmsted, president of the State Veterinary Association. "His courage in overcoming trauma and his dedication to helping others heal makes him an inspiration to us all." A blue ribbon was ceremonially placed around Courage's neck, though he seemed more interested in the apple slice that came with the honor. The crowd applauded and cameras flashed, documenting a moment that would be remembered long after the speeches were forgotten. As the ceremony concluded and the crowd began to disperse, Crenshaw found himself alone with Courage in the arena. The horse approached him, nickering softly in recognition of an old friend. "You know," Crenshaw said, stroking Courage's neck, "when I first saw you that day, limping and afraid, I thought I was trying to save you. Turns out you were saving all of us." Courage nudged Crenshaw's pocket, hoping for a treat, but also seeming to acknowledge the truth in those words. Through his suffering and recovery, he had brought out the best in everyone around him: the veterinarian's skill, the teenager's compassion, the community's generosity. As the sun set over the Monteverde Memorial Center, casting golden light across the arena, Sheriff Crenshaw knew that some stories have endings that are better than anyone could have imagined. Sometimes justice isn't just about punishment. It's about transformation, healing, and the recognition that even in the darkest circumstances, courage and compassion can prevail. Courage whinnied softly, as if in agreement, then wandered back to his paddock where a group of children waited to help with his evening care. His limp was barely noticeable now, but his spirit, that indomitable will to survive and thrive, would inspire everyone who met him for years to come. The sheriff's instinct to protect one injured horse had uncovered corruption, solved a murder, and created a legacy of healing that would touch countless lives. In the end, that seemed like a pretty good day's work.